February 14, 1943. Southern Tunisia, just after dawn. The desert is quiet in the way only war zones ever are, not peaceful, just waiting. A cold wind moves across the flats near the Marith line, lifting fine sand into the air and dragging it across steel helmets, map cases, and the long barrels of German anti-tank guns. Inside a low command shelter dug into the earth, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stands hunched over a table lit by a single flickering lamp. His fingers rest on a map he knows by memory. Every ridge, every wadi, every stretch of ground his officers have labeled with a simple, confident word. Impassable. Rommel has trusted that word before. It has saved him armies. A signals officer steps inside, boots crunching on sand-hardened ground. He hesitates just half a second too long. Rommel notices immediately. "Speak," the field marshal says. The officer swallows. "Forward observation units report armored movement to the southwest, Herr Feldmarschall." Rommel doesn't look up. Southwest means nothing by itself. "What kind of movement?" The officer clears his throat. "Tracked vehicles, medium tanks." That finally draws Rommel's eyes from the map. "British?" he asks. The officer shakes his head. "No, sir. Identification markings indicate United States Army." For a moment, the desert seems to lean inward. Rommel straightens slowly. "From where?" The officer points. Directly across a stretch of terrain the Afrika Korps had ruled out months earlier, a maze of broken ground, soft sand, and dry riverbeds that swallowed vehicles whole. Even experienced German drivers avoided it. Supply trucks had vanished there. Half-tracks overheated. Tanks bogged down until recovery vehicles snapped cables trying to pull them free. Rommel himself had walked parts of it. No army would move armor through that ground. No competent commander would even try. "How many?" Rommel asks quietly. The officer hesitates again. "Reports suggest dozens, sir, possibly more." Rommel says nothing. He simply turns back to the map. If American tanks are truly coming from that direction, then one of two things is happening. Either his reconnaissance is catastrophically wrong, or the Americans have done something no one believed they could. Outside, engines begin to growl, distant, low, and uneven. Not the sharp mechanical snarl of German panzers, not the familiar British rumble either. Something heavier, something unfamiliar. Rommel steps out into the open. You can almost feel it, the way experienced soldiers sense danger before they see it. The air itself seems different. The wind carries a sound that doesn't belong. Far off on the horizon, faint shapes begin to rise through the dust. Tall silhouettes, squared turrets, long-barreled guns catching the early sun. American M4 Sherman tanks. They are coming from the wrong direction. For Rommel, this is not just a tactical problem. It is a violation of logic. Only months earlier, the Americans had been humiliated at Kasserine Pass, scattered, disorganized, panicked under German pressure. Their units had broken. Their command structure had collapsed. German officers laughed afterward, calling them enthusiastic but naive. Rommel himself had not laughed, but he had not feared them either. The Americans, he believed, would take time. Time to learn. Time to bleed. Time to become soldiers. Yet now, in early 1943, those same Americans are doing something the British rarely attempted, and the Germans considered impossible. They are moving armor through the desert without roads. Rommel turns to his chief of staff. "Which commander is responsible for this sector?" he asks. The answer comes quickly. "Lieutenant General George S. Patton, sir." Rommel's expression tightens. He knows the name. Everyone does. Patton has been in North Africa only weeks, sent to clean up the shattered American II Corps. He arrived with polished boots, harsh discipline, and a voice that carried across entire encampments. Some Allied officers mocked him as theatrical, excessive, a relic. But Rommel never dismissed loud men too easily. Now he studies the advancing dust clouds. These tanks are not wandering. They are not lost. They are moving with intent. Behind the Shermans come trucks, fuel, ammunition, recovery vehicles strung out in carefully spaced columns. This is not improvisation. This is planning. Aggressive planning. Rommel's mind begins calculating automatically. If American armor is here, then his flank is no longer a flank. It is open ground. German anti-tank crews scramble into position. Range finders come up. Radios crackle. Officers shout corrections. But the problem isn't the tanks themselves. It's what they represent. Someone has studied the desert differently. Someone has questioned assumptions. Someone looked at terrain marked impossible and asked a dangerous question. What if it is? Rommel feels it then, not panic, not fear, but something colder. Recognition. This is how wars change. Not with grand speeches. Not with massive offensives. But with a single moment when one commander realizes the enemy no longer thinks the way he expects. As shells begin to fall and dust explodes into the air, Rommel turns back to his map. He draws a slow line with his finger, tracing the American advance. It cuts cleanly through territory his staff had considered safe. The desert, which once protected him, has betrayed him. And for the first time since arriving in Africa, the desert fox understands something unsettling. The Americans are learning faster than anyone predicted. And one general in particular is teaching them how to hunt. Rommel looks toward the horizon again, at the tanks emerging where there should be none. The impossible has arrived. And this time, it's wearing American stars. The sound of engines grows louder by the minute. Not chaotic. Not rushed. Steady. Measured. Rommel watches through binoculars as the American formation advances, Shermans rolling in staggered spacing, dust plumes deliberately offset so aerial observers can't easily count them. The movement is disciplined, purposeful. This is not the army he faced at Kasserine. This is something else. Hundreds of miles away, weeks earlier, George Smith Patton Jr. had stood in the North African dust with a very different expression on his face, one of anger more than confidence. The defeat at Kasserine Pass had humiliated the Americans. Units broke under pressure. Orders contradicted one another. Commanders froze. Patton was sent in not to inspire but to impose order. He did it immediately. Helmets strapped. Salutes enforced. Weapons cleaned until they gleamed in the sun. But discipline alone wasn't enough. Patton knew something deeper had gone wrong. The Americans had fought the desert the way Europeans fought forests and fields, tied to roads, dependent on predictable movement. They let terrain dictate their decisions. The Germans never did. So Patton began asking questions that irritated his staff. What's beyond that ridge? Who's actually driven there? Why does the map say no when no one's tried yes? Intelligence officers showed him terrain overlays, shaded red, marked impassable. Patton studied them briefly, then shoved them aside. Gentlemen, he said, the enemy already knows the roads. That's exactly why we won't use them. He ordered aggressive reconnaissance, not cautious patrols, but full-scale probing missions. Jeeps driven until engines overheated. Engineers sent forward with compasses instead of instructions. Tank commanders told to find ground the Germans assumed they wouldn't dare cross. Men got stuck. Vehicles broke down. More than once, officers requested permission to turn back. Patton denied it. Find a way through, he said. There always is. What emerged wasn't just a route, it was a philosophy. The desert wasn't empty. It was flexible. If you carried your own fuel, if you planned your spacing, if you accepted breakdowns as the cost of surprise. The Germans believed terrain could stop armies. Patton believed only hesitation could. So when his intelligence officers finally reported a viable approach route, rough, exhausting, punishing, he didn't ask if it was safe. He asked how fast they could move through it. Back in Tunisia, Rommel lowers his binoculars. American tanks have reached firing distance. German 88mm guns bark sharp, lethal cracks that echo across the flats. One Sherman erupts in flame, black smoke spiraling upward. Another throws a track and slews sideways. But the column doesn't halt. It adjusts. Tanks fan out. Infantry dismounts. Artillery begins answering back with dull, rhythmic thumps. Rommel watches carefully, not the explosions, not the chaos, but the behavior. They aren't panicking. They aren't bunching. They are reacting like veterans. He mutters something under his breath, not anger, not surprise, calculation. "This is Patton," he says quietly. The Field Marshal has spent his life reading enemies. In France, in Italy, across the desert. He can tell when an army is improvising and when it is executing something rehearsed. These Americans knew they would be here, which means German assumptions have already failed. Rommel's staff begins offering options. Shift reserves. Counterattack east. Fall back to secondary positions. All of them reasonable. All of them late. Because the real danger isn't the tanks themselves, it's what they've forced him to do. Rommel now must react. For months, he dictated tempo in Africa. He struck first. He maneuvered freely while his enemies scrambled to respond. Now the initiative is slipping from his hands. As reports stream in, more American units sighted, additional columns approaching through similarly impossible ground, Rommel realizes something else. This is not a one-off gamble. This is doctrine forming in real time. Patton is teaching his army to move without permission from terrain. And once soldiers learn that lesson, they never forget it. Rommel turns back to his map again. The red-shaded areas, once comforting, now look like invitations. Every assumption the Africa Corps built its defense on begins to feel fragile. The Desert Fox has been outmaneuvered before, but rarely like this. Not by brilliance alone. By refusal. Refusal to accept limits. Refusal to obey the map. And as the dust thickens and the American advance presses closer, Rommel understands something deeply unsettling. He is no longer fighting an inexperienced enemy. He is fighting an army discovering what it can do. And it is discovering it very quickly. Rommel folds the map slowly. Outside, the sound of engines keeps coming. Not stopping. Not hesitating. Advancing, the sun climbs higher, burning away the morning chill. By mid-morning, the Tunisian desert becomes a furnace. Metal scorches the skin. Canvas tents sag. Sweat darkens uniforms within minutes. This is the hour when mistakes multiply, when men grow careless, when engines overheat, when commanders lose clarity. Rommel knows this rhythm well. He built his reputation on exploiting it. Yet now, as he watches the battlefield unfold, the rhythm feels wrong. American artillery begins to land with unsettling precision, not massed barrages, calculated strikes, fire walking forward, shells falling not where German units are, but where they will need to move next. Rommel's radio operators shout updates. Supply trucks destroyed. Observation posts overrun. Forward units requesting permission to disengage. The requests stack up faster than answers can be given. Rommel steps outside again, dust coating his boots. Through binoculars, he sees American infantry advancing behind their tanks, cautious, yes, but coordinated. Machine guns leapfrogging. Medics already moving forward before casualties are even fully reported. This is not recklessness. This is momentum. And momentum, Rommel knows, is the deadliest weapon in mobile warfare. He thinks back to Kasserine, how the Americans collapsed under pressure, how their lines buckled when German armor punched through. What stands before him now bears almost no resemblance. The desert has done something extraordinary. It has accelerated their education. Weeks of defeat compressed into hours of adaptation. Rommel's staff gathers around him again. Herr Feldmarschall, one officer says carefully, if the Americans secure this approach, our southern defensive arc becomes untenable. Rommel nods slowly. He already sees it. The Mareth line, the old French fortifications meant to anchor Axis defense, was never designed to be attacked from here. Its strength lies in channeling the enemy into predictable avenues. Patton has simply walked around them. Not through strength, through imagination. Rommel orders a controlled withdrawal of select units, a painful decision, but necessary. Every kilometer gained by the Americans must be traded for time. Yet even as orders go out, he knows something worse. This maneuver will be studied, repeated, improved. The Americans are not merely winning ground, they are collecting confidence. Across the battlefield, a Sherman crests a low ridge and pauses briefly, turret scanning. The tank commander stands half exposed from the hatch, goggles dusted white, radio handset pressed to his ear. He isn't looking nervous. He's looking curious. That detail strikes Rommel harder than any shell. Curiosity is what good armies have. It's what defeated armies lose. As the afternoon drags on, German counterattacks falter. Fuel shortages limit maneuver. Allied air power begins to appear overhead, small at first, then constant. Every time Rommel shifts a unit, American reconnaissance seems already aware. Patton's probing eyes are everywhere. The battlefield no longer belongs to the desert fox. It belongs to whoever sees first. And today, that isn't him. Rommel retreats to his command shelter as dusk approaches. The desert glows red, then purple. Fires burn along the horizon. The smell of oil and cordite hangs thick in the cooling air. He removes his gloves slowly. Zit. And for a long moment says nothing. An aide brings him a situation report. Rommel reads it once. Then again. Losses are manageable. Position still defensible. Nothing here suggests catastrophe. And yet, he sets the paper down. This is not how defeat announces itself, he knows. Defeat begins quietly, with a shift in expectation. With the moment you realize the enemy is no longer playing the role you assigned him. Rommel had always believed the Americans would be dangerous eventually. He simply thought he had more time. Now in a single day, that illusion has collapsed. He reaches for his notebook, the same one he has carried across campaigns. He begins to write, slowly, deliberately. Not tactics. Observations. The American commander maneuvers with audacity, he notes. He accepts losses to gain freedom of movement. He does not wait for certainty. Rommel pauses, adds another line. This is no longer an inexperienced army. Outside, engines rumble into the night, American engines this time, repositioning, resupplying, preparing for tomorrow. Rommel knows what tomorrow will bring. More pressure, more movement, less predictability. The desert has changed sides. And as he closes his notebook, Rommel understands something deeply personal. For the first time in Africa, He is reacting to an opponent he did not shape. He is facing a general who does not fear the unknown. And that kind of enemy does not slow down. He accelerates. Rommel stares into the darkness beyond the shelter entrance. Somewhere out there, Patton is already planning his next move. And Rommel can feel it coming. Night falls over the southern Tunisian desert, but the war does not sleep. Stars glare down coldly, and the desert wind whistles across sand dunes like a living thing, carrying with it the faint, metallic scent of machinery and scorched earth. Rommel sits in his tent, maps scattered, reports piling up, but his mind is elsewhere on that single question that refuses to leave him. How did they get here? Earlier in the day, the Americans had demonstrated something that defied every assumption the Afrika Korps had made. Tanks had appeared where no roads existed, through sand that swallowed German half-tracks and trucks in previous years. Engineers had rigged makeshift paths. Crews had double-shifted repairs to keep vehicles moving. Supply convoys had maintained a tempo that seemed impossible. And all of it was orchestrated by one man, George S. Patton. Patton's philosophy was simple, yet revolutionary: speed, surprise, and audacity. He did not wait for perfection, nor did he allow terrain to dictate his plans. He accepted the risks of broken vehicles and exhausted troops as the cost of overwhelming momentum. Where the Germans saw barriers, Patton saw opportunity. Where the Germans hesitated, he pushed forward. Rommel thinks back to the first reports of American movement through impossible terrain. At first, he had dismissed them. Surely reconnaissance was flawed. Surely these were misidentifications, exaggerations. But by midday, the dust clouds on the horizon confirmed reality. Shermans, fully loaded, moving in disciplined formation, supported by fuel convoys and infantry, were advancing where no army should have been able to. And they were advancing fast. He flips through his notebook again, rereading his own words. This is no longer an inexperienced army. Rommel knows the implications. If the Americans continue this advance, the Mareth Line, the supposed anchor of his southern defenses, is compromised. German positions that once seemed secure are now vulnerable from unexpected directions. Retreats must be planned, counterattacks recalculated, supply lines reinforced, or risk being cut entirely. Outside, the first stars fade as dawn begins to lighten the horizon. The desert is no longer a passive observer. It is active in this contest. Every dune, every wadi, every patch of loose sand is a variable in a battle of ingenuity. Patton has proven that maps do not control armies. Imagination does. Rommel stands once more, stepping out into the chill. He feels the weight of history pressing down. He has faced brilliant adversaries before: Montgomery, de Gaulle's Free French units, British armored divisions, but none have forced him to rethink the desert itself. This is different. This is learning in motion. Across the sands, engines hum again. Recon vehicles move ahead of the tanks, scanning for threats, marking routes, reporting to command. Artillery positions shift in anticipation, not in reaction. Each American move is measured, calculated, deliberate. This is no random assault. This is a choreography of war, executed in real time under a man willing to risk everything to outthink his enemy. Rommel closes his eyes briefly. He allows himself a rare moment of reflection. The desert fox, the master of maneuver warfare, has been forced to react, not by superior numbers, not by overwhelming firepower, but by ingenuity, audacity, and relentless movement. The night ends, and with it comes the grim realization. From this point forward, the battlefield has changed. The Germans will no longer dictate the pace. The Americans under Patton have seized the initiative, and when an opponent moves faster than you can calculate, mistakes are inevitable. Rommel picks up his pen again. He writes a final note for the night. The desert has betrayed its own conventions. The Americans move where we thought impossible. We will adjust, but they will not wait for us. Outside, the first light of morning glints off the American tanks lining the horizon. Engines rev. Dust rises. The desert is no longer a neutral landscape. It is a proving ground, and Patton is already thinking 3 moves ahead. Rommel feels the shift deep in his bones. This is not just a battle. It is a turning point, a moment when assumptions crumble and the initiative changes hands. The Americans are no longer learning. They are teaching, and he is listening unwillingly but necessarily. For the desert fox, the question lingers as the sun climbs higher. How do you fight an enemy who does not respect the rules you have built around yourself? The answer will come tomorrow, February 15, 1943, just after sunrise, southern Tunisia. The desert is alive again, not with wind or sand but with the relentless hum of American engines. Sherman tanks, fully resupplied overnight, begin to roll once more. The columns stretch for miles, staggered and deliberate, each vehicle knowing its role. Infantrymen advance in formation, medics moving alongside. Supply trucks snake behind, almost invisible in the dust but perfectly timed to ensure no unit pauses. Rommel watches through binoculars from a command post dug into the ridge. He has seen many advances in his life, fast-moving columns, precision attacks, blitzkrieg maneuvers, but this is different. The Americans are not just attacking, they are teaching the desert itself to move with them. Every wadi crossed, every dune traversed is a lesson in audacity. He gestures to his staff. "Notice how they maintain spacing," he says quietly. "No congestion, no hesitation. Every unit has freedom, and yet none waste it." Across the battlefield, the Germans attempt to counterattack. Panther and PZ-KPF-WIV tanks pivot from positions thought secure. Anti-tank gunners take up firing positions along the ridges, but the Americans anticipate it. Recon units relay information in real time. Artillery adjustments fall with pinpoint accuracy. The Shermans weave through fire, adapt, and push forward. Rommel's aide reports, "Sir, fuel consumption in the enemy's supply columns is unusually low, given the terrain." Rommel doesn't respond immediately. He already knows what it means. Patton has solved a logistical puzzle that no one thought solvable. The Americans are moving faster, farther, and smarter than the German calculations predicted. Inside his mind, Rommel draws comparisons. At Kasserine, the Americans faltered. Chaos reigned, mistakes multiplied. But this organized, relentless advance demonstrates learning in motion. Patton is not just winning ground, he is rewriting assumptions. He has converted momentum into a weapon. By mid-morning, the first German forward posts fall. Machine guns are silenced, mortars captured. Sherman's crest ridges, infantry follow, and engineers immediately begin improving paths through the desert, ensuring that obstacles cannot slow the advance. The Americans are not stopping to celebrate. They are moving, always moving. Rommel realizes what this really means. The desert fox, master of maneuver, is now on the defensive in a way he has rarely experienced. His maps, once trusted guides, are now outdated predictions, no longer dictating the flow of battle. The ground itself seems to bend toward the Americans, reshaped by their determination. And Patton, he is miles ahead of the front line, already issuing orders, already imagining the next phase of movement. He treats terrain, weather, and enemy positions not as barriers, but as challenges to be solved. Rommel's heart pounds not with fear but with respect. The Americans are proving that initiative is not given by numbers or experience alone. It is taken, seized, maintained. Reports flood in. More Shermans have bypassed German strongpoints. Infantry columns appear where observation posts reported nothing. Supply trucks arrive just as needed, never too early, never too late. The desert has become a living entity responding to Patton's will. Rommel writes again in his notebook, a rare note of concession. The Americans operate beyond conventional limits. Their commander understands momentum as a weapon. We must adapt or be broken. Outside, dust rises across the horizon. The sound of engines, once distant and faint, is now a constant roar. a signal that the desert has chosen its new master, at least for now. Rommel knows that tomorrow will bring more decisions, more calculations, more impossible choices. And deep down, he cannot shake the sense that the Americans are not just advancing through terrain, they are advancing through his expectations. The desert has shifted, and Patton is leading the way. By the late afternoon of February 15, 1943, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the jagged ridges of southern Tunisia. The desert, once an ally of Rommel's genius, now seemed to favor a new player, a general who refused to honor the rules of terrain, supply, or expectation. Rommel sits once more in his command tent, the air thick with dust, sweat, and the faint tang of gunpowder. Reports continue to arrive: captured positions, destroyed artillery, the movement of Shermans through areas no one believed traversable. He scans each report, each radio transmission, each map, and sees the same undeniable pattern. The Americans are learning, adapting, and improvising faster than anyone anticipated. Outside, Patton's army moves with an almost uncanny coordination. Tanks fan out, infantry advances, engineers repair and expand tracks through sand that would swallow most vehicles whole. Supply lines pulse like veins, delivering fuel, ammunition, and water precisely when needed. This is no chaotic scramble. This is deliberate, controlled, unstoppable momentum. Rommel picks up his notebook again and writes slowly, deliberately. The American commander understands one fundamental truth: the desert is not a barrier, it is a challenge, and he exploits it fully. The note is not just tactical, it is personal. It reflects a realization Rommel rarely allowed himself to admit. He has always prided himself on reading the battlefield, anticipating enemy moves, and shaping outcomes. But today, he is reacting, not just to tanks or terrain, but to a mind unbound by convention. Even his most loyal staff sense the tension. Lieutenant Colonel von Arnim, an aide who has served in Africa for years, leans in. "Sir, they are moving as if they know our every plan before we make it." Rommel does not respond immediately. He watches the horizon, where dust clouds still rise from the advancing columns. He feels a mixture of admiration and unease. The Americans are executing with a clarity and boldness that his own forces would rarely dare. And Patton, with his relentless discipline, has turned audacity into a weapon. For hours, Rommel observes. Every decision he contemplates seems like a reaction rather than an action. His maps, once definitive, now offer little guidance. His flanks, once secure, are being probed from angles he did not expect. His men, though disciplined, are forced to cover ground they had never trained for. It is then, in the quiet of his tent, that Rommel realizes the true cost of underestimating the Americans. Not in men lost, not in ground ceded, but in the initiative surrendered. The battlefield has changed not just in layout, but in mindset. Patton has taken control of the tempo, and with it, the very narrative of the campaign. Rommel's pen hovers over the page. He writes one last observation for the day. Momentum is a weapon. Patton wields it like few others could. We must adapt, or we will be forced into defeat. The desert outside seems to whisper in response. Every ridge, every wadi, every stretch of sand now part of a shifting landscape that rewards ingenuity, speed, and boldness. Rommel knows that in the days to come, he will need to anticipate not just movements, but the unpredictable audacity of an enemy unafraid to break every rule. And as night falls, the last light glinting off the advancing Shermans, he cannot help but feel a rare, grudging respect. Patton has taught the desert a lesson, one Rommel himself will never forget. The desert fox has been forced to adapt, but the Americans, they are only beginning to discover how far momentum can take them. February 16, 1943. First light spills across southern Tunisia. The desert glows pale gold, and the long shadows of the dunes stretch like fingers over the sand. From his observation post, Rommel watches the American advance continue, unstoppable, methodical, and completely unexpected. Patton's forces have already carved multiple paths through terrain the Germans had once considered impassable. Tanks roll along ridges, infantry follows, engineers maintain tracks for fuel trucks and artillery, and reconnaissance units scout relentlessly ahead. Every element moves in coordination, almost as if the desert itself has aligned with the Americans' will. Rommel studies the maps spread across his table. The Mareth line, once the cornerstone of Axis defense, is now vulnerable on every flank. Every ridge he once relied upon for cover has been bypassed or neutralized. German units are repositioning constantly, but it is a defensive dance, not a plan of attack. Every move is a response. He recalls the reports from the last 2 days, the audacity of crossing terrain considered impossible, the speed of supply lines, the discipline of American units. And then he allows himself a rare acknowledgement. This is not luck. This is leadership. Patton's genius is not in brilliant maneuvers alone. It is in the culture he has instilled, a combination of relentless speed, disciplined coordination, and a refusal to let terrain dictate the rules. For weeks, his officers have drilled, and for hours they have executed. Each tank, each truck, each soldier is part of a machine moving faster than Rommel could have predicted. By mid-morning, American units begin to converge on a key crossroads, a point the Germans had fortified to delay any advance. Anti-tank positions open fire. The air fills with explosions and smoke. A Sherman is hit, tracks fly, flames lick the hull, but the column does not stop. Tanks fan out. Engineers immediately repair makeshift paths. Infantry secures flanks. Fuel and ammunition arrive on schedule. Momentum, it seems, cannot be broken. Rommel mutters to himself, "They anticipate every weakness." He paces the ridge. Every decision is critical. Every moment wasted is territory lost. For the first time in the campaign, he realizes he is no longer dictating terms. He is reacting, and in war, reaction is always costly. Across the horizon, Patton's voice crackles over radio communications, issuing orders not for caution but for acceleration. Every unit understands speed is the weapon, audacity is the ammunition, and hesitation is forbidden. Rommel scribbles in his notebook, "One last time before the sun fully rises." The Americans have rewritten the rules of desert warfare. They do not fear the terrain, they exploit it. Every obstacle is an opportunity. And as he looks back toward the advancing columns, a quiet, chilling realization settles in. The Desert Fox has been outmaneuvered not by numbers, not by firepower, but by the initiative of a mind unafraid to defy convention. The desert itself has changed hands. Patton has claimed it, and with it, the momentum of the campaign. Rommel knows one thing for certain. Tomorrow, the battlefield will be unrecognizable, and the Americans, now confident and unstoppable, will continue to write its rules.